Guys like us that work on ranches are the loneliest guys in the world. Just listen to the absolute weight of that sentence. It's an iconic quote from George Milton, and it perfectly sets the stage for exactly what we're about to unpack. We are looking at a story deeply rooted in profound isolation, a world where having someone, literally anyone, by your side is the absolute rarest treasure you could possibly find.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring John Steinbeck's timeless narrative of mice and men. To really wrap our heads around how efficiently Steinbeck captures the sheer fragility of the American dream, we're going to visually map our way through the book. We're using this sort of hand-drawn sketch note vibe today, so keep your eyes on the board as we build out this web of ideas around our central theme. All right, let's dive right in.
Starting things off with Part 1, The River and the Dream.
Our journey begins far away from the dust and sweat of the ranch. We start out at a really tranquil spot by the Salinas River. Look at the imagery Steinbeck uses right on the opening page here. He describes the river running deep and green, the water slipping twinkling over the yellow sands. It's basically an oasis. Steinbeck is deliberately using the serene, completely natural environment to establish a fleeting sense of peace. It's a sanctuary, really, before the harshness of the civilized world and the brutal reality of the ranch sets in.
Now, before we actually meet our main characters, we need to understand exactly what they are. Bindle stiffs. This is absolutely crucial historical context. A bindle stiff is an itinerant worker who carries all their worldly belongings rolled up in a blanket, a bindle. During the Great Depression, these men lived a completely precarious existence. They wandered for miles and miles from ranch to ranch, just desperately searching for temporary work. And this is the exact world George and Lennie inhabit. They're drifters. They carry everything they own right on their backs.
So look at how we've mapped out the drastic contrast between the two men here. On one side, we have George. He's small, he's quick, he's got these sharp, strong features. He's very much the protective leader. And then on the other side, we have his total opposite, Lennie. Lennie is a huge man with pale eyes, and he moves really heavily, dragging his feet, as Steinbeck says, the way a bear drags his paws. The big takeaway here is that despite these drastic physical differences, they have this incredibly unique, symbiotic survival bond. In a world where guys like them have, as George puts it, no family, well, they have each other.
Moving right along to Section 2, Harsh Realities of the Ranch.
So, we leave the peaceful river and arrive at the bunkhouse. And this is where their fragile dream of saving up for their own little farm slams right into unyielding reality. Check out this little timeline we've drawn here, because Steinbeck's foreshadowing is incredibly deliberate. Step 1. Lennie wants to pet a soft mouse, but he accidentally kills it because he literally doesn't know his own strength. And we find out this echoes the trouble they ran into back in a town called Weed. Then Step 2. Slim gives Lennie a puppy, but again, Lennie's massive hands are just way too much for the fragile creature. All of this is pointing incredibly ominously to Step 3, the ultimate tragedy involving Curley's wife. It brilliantly shows how Lennie's total inability to control his immense physical strength escalates tragically as the story goes on.
And adding a whole lot of fuel to this dangerous fire is the boss's son, Curley. This quote from the old swamper, Candy, hits the nail right on the head. Seems like Curley ain't giving nobody a chance. Curley is this deeply combative, incredibly insecure figure who constantly tries to prove his own toughness by picking fights with bigger men. Obviously, this insecurity puts him on a direct collision course with the giant, gentle Lennie. George sees it immediately, warning that Lennie doesn't know any rules if he gets backed into a corner.
Okay, let's jump over to Section 3, Loneliness and the Outcasts.
Now, beyond just George and Lennie, nearly every single character we meet on this ranch is absolutely starved for human connection. We've sketched out a pretty brutal contrast here between the idealized dream and the grim reality. Over here, George and Lennie share this vision of getting a little place, living off the fat of the land, raising rabbits, and finally belonging somewhere safe. But then, look at the grim reality faced by the ranch's outcasts. You've got Candy, who is aging and terrified of being thrown out once he's deemed useless, much like his old blind dog. You have Crooks, who suffers in bitter isolation due to racial segregation, physically forced to sleep alone in the harness room. And Curley's wife, who is trapped in a totally loveless marriage, just wandering the ranch looking for someone, anyone, to talk to. Literally everyone is desperate for a place to belong.
And nothing illustrates that desperation better than the scene in Crooks' room in the barn. Lennie kind of wanders in, and for a brief, shining moment, Candy and Lennie actually share their dream of the farm with Crooks. And Crooks, who is this deeply cynical, completely isolated stable hand, actually lets his guard down. He dares to believe in the dream, even offering to work for free just to be part of their safe haven. But within minutes, the cruel reality of his social standing comes crashing back down when Curley's wife threatens him. Crooks immediately retracts right back into his shell of protective dignity. It just goes to show you how fragile this dream really is.
Which inevitably brings us to Section 4, the shattered dream. Watch how incredibly fast everything falls apart on that fateful Sunday afternoon. Notice how the pacing of the narrative just accelerates. It starts with this quiet sorrow. 1. Lennie is mourning because he accidentally killed his puppy. 2. Curley's wife walks in, again just looking for someone to talk to, and she confides her own shattered dreams to him. 3. She lets him stroke her soft hair, but when she panics at his heavy grip, Lennie panics too, and in his terror, he accidentally breaks her neck. 4. Within moments, that quiet afternoon completely erupts into high-stakes chaos. Curley and the men organize a violent, armed manhunt, and just like that, the carefully protected dream is dead in the hay.
And finally, Section 5, the inevitable end.
As the noise of the manhunt fades into the distance, the story returns to the exact location where it began. If we look at these side-by-side snapshots, the opening text of Chapter 1 next to the closing text of the final chapter, Steinbeck's architecture is undeniable. Notice the symmetry here. The story begins at the deep green pool of the Salinas River, and it ends exactly there. This perfectly circular narrative structure visually reinforces the inescapable nature of their fates. Despite all their walking, all their planning, and all their dreaming, they couldn't escape their destiny. They ended up exactly where they started.
As the shouts of the lynch mob draw closer, George finds Lennie hiding in the brush. And here, in these truly heartbreaking final moments, George recites their shared dream of the farm one last time. For the rabbits, George repeats. He paints the picture of their little place, making absolutely sure the very last thing Lennie experiences is a vision of safety, happiness, and belonging. And then, with his hand shaking, George mercifully pulls the trigger of Carlson's Luger, saving his best friend from the brutal mob.
As we close the notebook on this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to really chew on. Was George's terrible final act one of ultimate mercy, saving his friend from a terrifying fate? Or does the crack of that pistol signify the ultimate defeat of the American dream for the working class? It's a heavy burden of loyalty to reflect on. Take this question with you long after you've finished watching, and think about the true cost of friendship in an unforgiving world. Thanks for sketching this out with me today.